I think that most of us would agree that Need for Speed is finally on the right track. Despite being based on Heat, Unbound is definitely a major improvement when compared to the previous games in the franchise, both in terms of art style, ironing out the bugs, the game world, and so on. However, there's always room for even more improvement, and I thoroughly agree with that, because Need for Speed, the foundations that have been laid by Ghost Games have a lot of little niggles and bugs and other similar things that need to be fixed. And it's gotten to the point where there's now so many little flaws that you might not even notice while playing through the games that it kind of sometimes might hinder the experience, and it always makes it clear that this used to be a Ghost game, as is the case with Unbound. I haven't played Unbound myself, but it's, from what I've understood, it seeps a little bit of heat from a few angles, heat as in the previous release of Need for Speed. But it's a much better game. But as I said, there is always room for improvement, and that brings me on to what we're going to talk about today. So, a friend of mine, Carl, aka Club Sport, I've mentioned him before on the channel. If you've been here a while, you'll know. Him, along with James Miata, James Needs Miata, and Rattler. These three people have put together a 35-page document about all the things that should be improved in Need for Speed. And I've gotten permission from these wonderful people to tell you about this document in today's video. We're going to read through it relatively quickly, and we're going to analyze all of their suggested points for improvement, and I'm going to contribute a little bit with my own ideas and what I think of these things. So let's get started. First of all, this document is amazingly well done. It follows on from the art style of Need for Speed Unbound with the fonts and the background and the use of the yellow color, and it even includes actual Need for Speed UI fonts. Remember, these were people behind the Unite project, so they have access to the files, and they can rip these fonts from the game. So, first thing we're going to do is check out all of the subheads here, all of the subsections in the document. So, there's the introduction. There's gameplay, which itself has its own subsections. Vehicle handling and tuning, game modes, police system, multiplayer system. Then there's the theming and atmosphere. Cars and customization, which includes the cars themselves, vehicle customization and vehicle detail. The world we drive in, soundtrack, content creation, user interaction, the characters, summary, and, well, drawing inspirations for the document. So I think that covers basically all the features in modern Need for Speed games. So let's go ahead and see what each one of them is about. Now, I should preface this by saying I'm not going to read through the entirety of the document, because if I were to do that, this would be an hour-long video, because, again, 35 pages. So we're just going to breeze through it. I'm going to read you the introduction here. Hello to Criterion Games and whoever may be reading this document. Need for Speed has been in a recent franchise turmoil as of recent times, especially in the eyes of its fans. There has been more complaining than there is praising, particularly in Reddit and Discord, and rightfully so. And yes, that's true. If you've been on the Need for Speed subreddit, you'll know all that the fan base likes to do is complain. But there are some valid points in there, which we will see mentioned in this document. Anyway, back to reading. There's a myriad of issues that need to be addressed in the franchise and in the games moving forward. As a global franchise and as a product of a business, Need for Speed, of course, has to appeal to as many people as possible, whether it be teenagers looking to kill some time or parents seeking out their next Christmas gift. However, what is more crucial than either of those is that the franchise's beloved fans, the reason why even after over 20 years it's still here today, going on to 30 actually. High sales figures may look cool on EA and Criterion's portfolios, but if the fans don't like what they're seeing, it can create a ripple effect affecting the franchise overall. Excellent point. I have asked fans of the franchise from dedicated communities of what they feel should be in a Need for Speed game, as well as their criticisms of the recent titles and what can be improved. This document will cover everything from the crucial aspects that need to be reworked and improved to the ones where no number of meetings, reports, and consumer insights can possibly convey. So you get the idea pretty much. The introduction is what the document is going to include. So now let's go ahead and analyze each one of the points one by one. First thing we have here is gameplay. I'm not going to go through every single part of the gameplay. I'm just going to skip to the good part. So vehicle handling and tuning, which starts with break the drift and hold the line. So this is obviously a reference to break to drift, which has been a handling mechanic in Need for Speed since Hot Pursuit 2010. And while some people are okay with it, like me, I didn't really have a problem with break to drift, but I do agree that the drifting system in Need for Speed does need to be a little bit more intricate and a little bit more involved. So let's see what our document creators had to say about it. In its current form, the break to drift or gas to drift handling model used in the most recent titles in the series opposes the concept of fine-tuning your car's handling. Upgrades such as racing differentials and race tires become redundant as you are forced to drift around corners almost as if the player is on rails. This is absolutely true. Now, I haven't played Unbound, so I don't know what the physics behave behave like in that. But it is true that no matter how you tune your car in the previous games, you were basically forced to drift. And it was especially bad in Payback because it doesn't matter if you had a front-wheel drive car, a rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, it didn't matter. Every single corner you had to power slide. And they also thought it was a good idea to make events where you drive drag cars around corners. I'm still completely befuddled about that. There weren't any real drag racing events in the game. There were, but they were like 2 or 3, and the rest of them you had to use a grip car, I'm guessing because the map wasn't designed very well around drag racing. But anyway, back to the document. The best solution is to include a rich tuning system where every part matters and keep the game feeling approachable and arcade, and that would require the brake to drift format to be dropped. The reasoning for this is relatively simple. The current handling system takes control away from the player during cornering and instead relies on a script which can frequently get the player intentions wrong. This is true. The Need for Speed handling model as of recent times does not have a tire model. There's no tire behavior in the script. It's just like an on-off switch. You either drift or you don't drift, which is kind of confusing because, I've heard designing a tire model is pretty involved and I guess they didn't have enough time or resources for that. But, it does take control away from the player. You want to go around the corner with grip physics, but the game isn't letting you do that. And let's not get into all the handling bugs like the hopping and the clipping in Need for Speed Heat or the crab walking in Need for Speed 2015, which was frustrating as all hell. This problem also has a knock-on effect to the current tuning system. Regardless of the player's chosen differential, tire, and suspension setup, the car will still be forced to drift while cornering. These issues contradict the concept of the game focusing on vehicle tuning, as the changes made do not affect the car as they should. NFS should ideally target an approachable simcade handling, a realistic, responsive, yet highly forgiving handling model. This means the handling should be predictable and there should be no artificial assists forcing the car to behave a certain way. The car's movement should be natural and fluid with no outside interference. Arcade racing games of late have varied in the quality of their handling models. Some good examples to use for research would be games such as Grid 2019, Grid Legends, Forza Horizon 5, Driver San Francisco, and Wreckfest. Now, I have played like 10 minutes of Grid 2019, 10 minutes of Forza Horizon 5 on like 25 frames per second, and I have played a fair bit of Driver San Francisco, and I agree with all of these points. And from what I've seen on YouTube, the Crew Motorfest is also doing an interesting thing with its physics and the drifting model, because it actually involves counter steering and stuff. If accessibility remains a concern while transitioning to a new handling model, assist should be available to tweak in the settings, such as drifting counter steer assist or an automatic braking assist for corners. Other assists such as traction control or ABS could be put inside of a vehicle's tuning setup or could be tweakable in the game settings. Which, there is technically a stability control setting in the latest Need for Speed games in the tuning options, but does that do anything? I don't remember. I don't remember even turning it off, but I don't know if that does anything. Let me know in the comments if it does, or indeed if it exists. Under the hood, while anyone should be able to easily pick up and play the game from just bolting on upgrades, having extended tuning settings can help more skilled players refine their car to suit them and their driving style better. An unshackled handling and physics model can help in this regard. As discussed above, the current model makes any tuning tweaks feel redundant. Absolutely. The whole live tuning thing that they got going on with just 3 settings is just weird. I think, in my opinion, it panders a bit. It appeals too much to an extremely casual audience. We should have the option to do both. So simple tuning if we don't want to be bothered like me. It's not that I don't really understand the options, although I kind of don't, not gonna lie. It's more sort of having the option for those who do want to be bothered and those who don't want to be bothered. Moving on, we have Nitrous. It's not a Need for Speed game if there isn't a Nitrous tank available. It could do with being more than just press button to speed up. Some experimentation to make it strategic was done with the Burst NOS feature of Unbound, but it can be done a bit better. Here's an idea. Limited usage in races similar to Underground 1 and the Midnight Club series, making players think twice on when they'd want to use their NOS and what setup they want to go for. Do you want to save your NOS for the crucial moments, or do you just hammer it when you can? To this, I would like to contribute Juiced 1, because in Juiced 1, if your car sustains enough damage, your nitrous tank will leak, and eventually you'll run out of nitrous because you weren't careful with your driving. While Need for Speed relies on a health gauge, and this could lead to some unfair moments like the cops taking you out and your nitrous leaking, I think that it could add, if it's done properly, it could add an interesting level of depth to how you drive and how careful you are when you're driving. In addition, cars purchased off the lot should not have any NOS system equipped. Yes, 100% agree. Next, Game modes. Whether it's solo or online, a variety of game modes can help pack the game with things to do. While the street racing ethos of Need for Speed and the inclusion of licensed cars have to be considered, for some aspects, fun gameplay has to take priority. After all, people play video games to have fun. Mode selection. Circuit and sprint races are always a requirement. No racing game will be one without them. Having said that, there are a few disciplines that are either lacking in execution or are just straight up missing from the franchise. For others, they can be welcome additions for anyone looking a different type of challenge. The bare minimum is drift events. They were in Heat, but the drifting in Heat was completely broken, so there was no point in having them. And then in Unbound, they just removed them and replaced them with all the activities around the map, those types of drift events. While they're typically fine, as it says in the document, it can do with a little bit of spicing up. Clipping points and bonuses for wall proximity to bring your score up are absolutely welcome. These systems are present in older Need for Speed games such as Shift and Carbon. Underground 2 and Underground 1 also had the bonus area where you had to drift along the ends of the track because that would make your points go faster. And they're also taken into account in real-world drift competitions such as the Formula Drift series and even grassroots drift events held at smaller tracks. Traffic cars should also be disabled for these events. Yes, there's nothing more annoying than trying to get the perfect drift angle and then you bump into a GMC Sierra. In real life, even in public streets and canyon roads, people always make sure there's no other cars or civilians that may be affected, sometimes closing down sections of road or waiting until the wee hours of the night to allow drifters to do their thing. True. Drag racing. As drag racing hasn't been in a Need for Speed game properly since Payback. They removed the drag racing from Heat completely, and they didn't bring it back for Unbound either. And obviously, drag racing, according to the document here, should be structured the same way as before. Doing a burnout before starting to get optimal tire temperatures, getting the optimal RPM before the lights go green for that perfect launch, and forced use of manual transmission. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe 2015 did not force you to use the manual transmission for drag races, which was just ridiculous. But anyway, like with drift events, drag racing events should be completely devoid of traffic. The challenge of nailing the perfect shifts already provide a sufficient challenge, and in real life, blocks of roads are closed off to make sure no other external variables come into play. Time trials. It's exactly what it says on the tin, pretty much. Setting up a course, getting a stopwatch out, and seeing how fast the car can get from point A to point B. It's the player against the clock. Now, I believe that Unbound introduced something similar with the hot laps, but that's an activity. This would be like a proper event. And finally, we have something that's been missing from Need for Speed, well, forever. Challenge Series, which was a staple in classic Need for Speed games, providing players a unique set of challenges to complete. This had a sort of mini progression system, since you need to complete one to unlock one or two more. And this would be perfect for endgame, as it says in the document. After you finish the campaign in Unbound, there's nothing much else to do other than repeating the core gameplay loop to get more cars and multiplayer as well. Challenge Series grants you more replayability, and it could potentially unlock other interesting things like unique customization or bonus cars. We'll get back to the bonus cars, by the way. And finally, Prestige Mode, which was introduced in 2015, and it was the only time it appeared in the game. Prestige Mode took you back to all the events in the game, this time introducing a medal system where each medal has a corresponding time, and attaining that time, or better, rewards you that medal. Gives the game longevity, gives the player a challenge, and makes for a great conversation starter. I never played through Need for Speed 2015's Prestige Mode, but I've heard that it was very challenging, and it added a nice little additional gameplay loop after you complete the game. And finally, skill system. This is the last part of the gameplay part of the document. This is very simple. If we do wicked stunts in the game, we want the game to acknowledge what we did, making it all the more satisfying to pull off. Although it's one thing implementing them, it's another thing making them have a purpose. This system can be tied to a special shop that you purchase perks and rewards from new cosmetics to a special car. The next segment of the document is the police system, and it starts with putting the intelligence in AI. To put it bluntly, the police AI in Unbound leaves a lot to be desired. The underlying systems have to be a bit more sophisticated. They just have to execute their strategies better, such as pit maneuvers, roadblock placements, and rolling blockades. Then they go on to talk about going on the offensive, where the players are almost always in defense mode when it comes to police chases because we have a health bar. There should be some offensive options like pursuit tech perhaps, although it is a controversial choice, or perhaps pursuit breakers. I can't even count how many people constantly request pursuit breakers to return to the new Need for Speed games. It's a complete mystery to me why we don't have them yet, but hopefully they'll return one day. Cooldown spots. This is very simple to bring back the cooldown spots from the older games Most Wanted and Carbon. You just go hide somewhere, you shut off your engine like you have to do in the newer games, and it just increases the speed of you evading the cops. Next we have the multiplayer system, and it starts with global autolog. One of autolog's biggest flaws is not being able to see global times, only your friends is. Being able to compete against other people globally in events and activities is part of the appeal in a strong online ecosystem within a racing game. I absolutely agree. I mean, I'm not really well versed into multiplayer aspects of Need for Speed games, but if this sounds like something that should have been there from the very beginning, I don't know why it's not. Next, drop in, no dropouts. So many modern racing games are all about seamlessness and no lobbies. That's true, and becomes a pain, but it does become a pain in practice. In Unbound in particular, parties can be a hassle to join, especially when a session becomes full and newly invited person can't hop in the same session unless they wait for somebody else to leave. And there's no party games. Players also simply can't be left alone. So let's say you're organizing a car meet or a photography session with a bunch of other cars, and somebody will just gate crash and destroy your cars and do a hit and run, basically. Or they'll get the cops on you or something like that. A lobby system similar, echoing the likes of Forza Horizon 1 and Wreckfest, alongside giving the players the freedom to join a random free-for-all session, would be an excellent addition. True. Dedicated pure racing and drifting. This is basically something similar to the Crew 1's lobby system, where you just, if you want to do race after race after race, and being able to vote which races you want to do, and that Unbound currently doesn't allow that because you have to do the meetup plus playlist system, and then with the new Volume 3 update, everyone just prefers to do link-ups. And finally, something that I really agree with, party modes, like Cops and Robbers, Infection, Capture the Flag, and modes that, well, those are modes that simply allow players to turn their brains off a bit and have some fun. Next up, we have theming and atmosphere, which is the reason why this document was made in the first place. Any racing game can have a sophisticated handling model and implement various game modes that lead to hours of fun, but these specific, nuanced aspects are what make Need for Speed have its distinct identity, standing out against the rest. And then we go to the most controversial aspect of Need for Speed Unbound, the soundtrack. I like to preface this by saying I haven't listened to the soundtrack of Unbound. I haven't really been interested all that much, but the main problem people have with it is the specific focus on just one genre, hip-hop, and not much else. And that's what this document says. It says, not strictly hip-hop. It was understood that the games from this point on may be circled in and around hip-hop culture and the lens it looks through towards the automotive side of things. However, it shouldn't be the sole outlook that is to be expressed in Need for Speed, no matter how dominant it is in car culture. It can feel extremely one-note and ultimately risks alienating a good portion of the fanbase, which, from my understanding, it has already done. Then we have urban car culture at large. There's plenty of angles and lenses within urban car culture you can take from across the globe, from the grassroots to the high-end, from the streets to the racetracks. The game utilizes real-world cars, real-world parts, and to an extent, real-world people who live and breathe the culture. The game should be able to reflect that. This is very true, because I don't care what racing game comes along and says it's a reflection of urban car culture. Need for Speed is a reflection of urban car culture, and that's why everyone flocks to Need for Speed, because only they can capture what it means to be a car enthusiast in the modern world. Not the Crew Motorfest with the planes and boats. But, Need for Speed is all about car culture. And the game should reflect that even more, like the document says. I fully agree with this. Next, what people actually do. Now, this document was written by somebody who has had a lot of experience in their local car scene. I'm referring to Carl, of course. So he is in a position to tell us what people actually do in real-life car culture, hosting car meets, for example. Yes, Unbound has car meets being an integral part of the gameplay loop, however, it fails to capture what a car meet actually feels like. There's a lot of conversation happening about everyone's pride and joy, spec sheets, some people rev up their cars, and some people do burnouts and donuts. You don't just sit there and look around like you do on Unbound and its meetups. And these can be hosted just about anywhere. Parking lots, gas stations, streets, underground spaces, what have you. They also partake in raves and parties. In typical car meets in parking lots and gas stations, there's often someone blasting music from either Bluetooth speakers they brought along or a ludicrous sound system installed in their cars. Yeah, we still have the option to install a sound system in Need for Speed Unbound, right? Which does absolutely nothing? I don't understand why they had that feature in the first place. And joyrides. Sometimes it isn't about competing to see who's faster. It's all about having fun with your and your friends' cars. Just set a destination and enjoy the ride. Like with car meets, people also love discussing their builds in these joyrides. And when people trust each other enough, they borrow each other's cars to get ideas on their own. Then there's breaking the law. Being a public nuisance is why the cops come after us in the first place. It should be recognized that we are essentially criminals doing bad things, and it is really, really fun to break their law in our souped-up sports cars in the game, with both the plot and the gameplay to support it. One thing that 2015 hit the nail on the head is how the story perfectly encapsulates what happens in car meets and events in real life. It's mostly just some friends hanging out and showing off their cars to one another. Of course, Need for Speed has its rivals, but for the most part, there's a group of people who you'll have some friendly competition with and help you out building your car up. The car community always has this tight-knit connection within each other, no matter the car you drive and your social status. And now it's finally time for my favorite part, cars and customization. Literally, one of the main reasons why we come to Need for Speed in the first place, and this part speaks to me on a personal level because customization for me is one of the most important aspects of a racing game. Oh, for fuck's sake. I want to be able to express myself, being an automotive channel and a car enthusiast and automotive writer myself. I want to be able to express myself with cars in Need for Speed because Need for Speed offers the best self-expression tools, which is detailed customization. However, customization and the cars in Need for Speed need some pretty hefty improvement. So let's have a look what the document has to say. First of all, curated rides. This one speaks to me on a personal level. Need for Speed has always been a franchise that prevails quality over quantity in terms of the car list, preferringly a lovingly curated selection of cars with plenty of customization for each one, instead of adding cars for the sake of upping a number. Adding a car in Need for Speed is a lot more of a big deal compared to Forza or The Crew, so it is crucial that the game adds completely new cars and parts rather than a different variant of the same model, except they did the latter, starting with Heat. And that's what it says here. They can become quite redundant, especially when the cars end up sharing parts and people end up heavily customizing their garage beyond stock. We don't need 5 Aventadors and 7 991 generation Porsche 911s, nor do we need the convertible versions of various models in the game, especially since roof mechanisms don't even work. With a smaller but more curated selection, each car can be paid more attention to in all aspects, from visuals to part selection to performance. You could take time in making each car feel unique and distinct rather than having to deal with an expensive car list that you may end up compromising to meet deadlines. So then, the picks, starting with the latest hotly anticipated models. So your Honda Civic Type R, the new Civic Type R, the Lotus Emira, which is an Unbound, the new Ford Mustang Dark Horse. I'd add to this the Acura Integra Type S, the new BMW M2, stuff like that. Then there's popular cars in automotive culture, which Need for Speed seriously lacks. So we do have a whole bunch of JDM legends and stuff like that, but there's a lot of stuff missing. You know, where's the Nissan 300ZX? We finally got an Eclipse, that's something, but, you know, Nissan 300ZX, R33 Skyline GTR, FC Mazda RX-7, FB Mazda RX-7, NB Mazda Miata. I can go on. Infiniti G35, please. The Infiniti G35 should be a playable vehicle, not a traffic car. Mitsubishi Starion, that's a good one. Not a lot of people seem to mention that. The Honda Prelude. I can go on about this. And the good thing about all of these cars is that they always have a lot of aftermarket support from plenty of companies, and they carry motorsport heritage, so there's plenty of OEM tuning parts and race versions available. And then 1 or 2 obscure oddball models. So yeah, Need for Speed just stopped messing around with oddball strange cars, like the Punto in Most Wanted 05, the Alfa Brera in Need for Speed Carbon, and then there was the Peugeot 106 in Underground 2, the Corsa as well. The Dodge Neon, that was a good one. The Renault Megane RS, the Volkswagen Scirocco, these were all in the run and undercover as well. But yeah, we like to see oddball cars, especially me, who is a fanatic for oddball cars. You know, give us a Citroën, why not? This is my bias towards Citroën speaking here a little bit, but, you know, give us a Citroën. We did get 2 oddball cars in the new updates. We got a DeLorean and we got the Maybach S-Class. The DeLorean is cool, but the Maybach S-Class, no. I mean, that's cool too, but literally nobody asked for that. I understand that it's the whole hip-hop culture thing again. That's a big car in hip-hop culture, whatever. But no, nobody asked for that. The car list should also be split into different vehicle types. This allows for players to try out different cars and setups throughout the game, especially when the implementation of vehicle restrictions is well done. And then there's the customization. Straight away, we start with licensed parts. In a game with real-world cars, you want some real-world parts to go along with it. Not only do racing games serve as a creative outlet, it also serves as a blueprint for anyone who'd love to build their dream car if they ever get a chance to do so. The current games can also do with a lot more licensed parts from some cars, particularly for brands which are already licensed, which I do not understand. So many licensed part manufacturers, none of their parts are in the game. For some cases, you'll see in a minute. From Liberty Walk's Silhouette Works line to Vorsteiner's suite of options available for most high-end cars, almost every car has a company out there that makes aftermarket parts for. Speed Hunters can help you source companies and parts to include Forza Horizon 5, Juiced, Midnight Club Los Angeles, Gran Turismo 7, and Street Racing Syndicate are good places to start in terms of what parts companies actually license. In-house tuning, this is basically some manufacturers offer tuning parts from the factory. You can just implement those as well, which I agree with, and some motorsport inspired parts or actual motorsport parts like Ferrari and Lamborghini have, and realistic fiction. So Need for Speed Unbound introduced the legendary customs body kits, which are totally ridiculous. Some of them are really cool, like the Crown Victoria, which they have pictured in here. By the way, that wrap was made by Club Sport. and I'm a proud mama. But then you have stuff like the new RoboJets Mazda RX-7 and that hideous Legendary Customs Nissan GTR. Okay, it's not hideous, but it's ridiculous. It has 6 exhaust pipes coming out of every orifice on it. It doesn't make any sense. And the RoboJets RX-7, while it is interesting, it's weird. Like, no. I'm just gonna summarize what they say here. Stratospeed wide bodies from the black box era should just come back, or something similar. And some interior parts perhaps, like seats and roll cages like they were in Pro Street. Even though we don't have an interior camera, it would be cool to have. And then, one of my personal favorites, wheel and tire customization. So I'm just gonna summarize what they say here. But first of all, include rims from brands that are licensed but don't have any rims in the game, like NK. NK, they do have the license to NK, and only one car in the game has NK wheels, and it's the Honda NSX-R. And we can't put NK wheels on our cars. Can you imagine the disdain from a lot of Evo owners who can't put NK RS05RR wheels on their Evos, because a lot of Evos in real life have those? Or indeed the disdain of not being able to put RPF1s on anything, because they're very popular in the tuner scene. They also should include auto sculpt and the wheel customization. I'll just help out the creators of the document here. Just copy Midnight Club Los Angeles' wheel customization, because no other game in history has done it better. And then there's the reintroduction of Autosculpt, taking a page out of Pro Street and Undercover's books. These games had a variety of options to further customize the wheels according to the car, thanks to Autosculpt. At the very least, give players differing tire width options no matter which wheel is equipped. It's extremely jarring putting a wide body kit on a car, only to see your car sitting on bicycle wheels. Stance tuning. Stance tuning, basically more adjustment options, track width, reintroducing track width and suspension rake, because the stance tuning has been neglected in Need for Speed for forever, tire diameter, and if there's clipping issues, who gives a f***? So yeah, there's a whole lot more to get through. I think we're about halfway through and this video is already incredibly long. So this is part 1. Join us in part 2 where we're going to continue on with the paint and the wrap, vehicle details, the world we drive in, the soundtrack, and content creation and user interaction tools, and all the other stuff that's left. Thank you everyone for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I will leave the social links for the creators of this amazing Need for Speed suggestions document in the description. You can also follow me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, in the description. Thank you for watching again. See you in the next video. Goodbye.